Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Michael Wesley and I'm the Executive Director of the Lowy Institute. Welcome to the 2010 Lowy Lecture, our flagship event. The Lowy Lecture provides a platform for a prominent speaker to reflect on Australia's role in the world and the world's influence on Australia. It is an expression of the Lowy Institute's mission to produce analysis of international affairs from an Australian perspective, to stimulate more extensive public consideration and discussion of the world among Australians, and to project an Australian perspective on the world into global debates. The Lowy Institute was established in 2003 to interrogate how the world impacts on a small, open economy and society situated at the edge of the fastest developing region in human history, and to think about how Australia can and should respond. The Lowy Institute seeks to inspire new thinking and discussion about Australia in the world. We're determined to go beyond the established and comfortable foreign affairs agenda, a realm largely inhabited by a small number of specialists, practitioners and academics, to discuss international issues that a much broader cross-section of the Australian community cares about. The Lowy Institute also exists to influence policy agendas and decisions, particularly in realms where governments have given up on big, hard thinking and universities have retreated into academic benchmarking. Over the past year, Australia has grappled with three big decisions: how to slow our greenhouse emissions, how to redistribute some of the windfall gains from the resources boom, and how to regulate the banking sector. Each of these may seem like a domestic question, but in fact, they have major international causes and consequences. And on each of these issues, you could argue that sober analysis and long-term thinking have been overwhelmed by short-term considerations and interests. The past year has demonstrated emphatically this country's need for independent centres of policy analysis, discussion and influence. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware that for a large number of you, about a third of our audience tonight, this is your first experience of the Lowy Institute. That's a fact about which I'm particularly delighted. It means that we're doing what we've set out to do and reaching audiences that would not normally be interested in the usual foreign policy topics. It's partly to be explained by our choice of speaker, Dr. Megan Clark, who few would ordinarily associate with international affairs. Nor would they associate with traditional international affairs some of our previous Lowy lecturers. The CEO of the world's biggest mining company, Marius Kloppers, prominent environmental scientist Bob May, or former central bank chief Ian Macfarlane. And yet it doesn't take much imagination to realise how the global resources trade or climate change or financial regulation shapes the world in which we live. And science and technology, the subjects of tonight's lecture, also shape and reshape our world in profound ways. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lowy Institute wouldn't exist but for the philanthropic gift of the Lowy family to do something really quite rare in Australian public life, and that is to invest in ideas, in the production of ideas, in the production of ideas for the public good. The Lowy Institute is now supported by a range of corporate interests and individuals, but the Lowy family remains our largest single funder. So it gives me great pleasure this evening to invite Stephen Lowy, a director of the Lowy Institute, to come and introduce Dr. Megan Clark. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the directors, some of whom are in the room tonight, of the Lowy Institute, and particularly our chairman, my father, Frank Lowy. I'd like to welcome you here this evening. My dad sends his apologies, but I think you'll excuse him because he's working on another international event right now in Switzerland, trying to bring the World Cup here. So I think we'll excuse his personal appearance here tonight, and I'll try and do my best to stand in. But of course, we are all wishing him a lot of luck, I'm sure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today and showing your support for the Lowy Institute. We can't tell you how very much this is appreciated. All of us here tonight, we're here because you share the interest in the forces that shape our world, as Michael said before. We of course follow, study and comment on what we might call the surface developments, the current topics of interest, like the midterm elections in the United States, and what Europe might do in response to the problems with the Irish economy. But our primary interest at the Institute has always been to look beneath the surface issues at more fundamental influences on how the world works. This is why when we established the Institute some 7 years ago, we invited one of our most distinguished scientists that Australia has produced, Lord Robert May, to join our advisory council. He has made a profound contribution to the Lowy Institute and it deepened our appreciation of the way in which technology and the science that underpins this technology influences our world. In fact, one of his major contributions was to deliver this annual lecture in 2007, in which he warned of the changes needed in the way world politics operates if we are to successfully respond to the challenges posed by global warming. And so the Institute's work has been heavily informed by his advice and others like him, including Sir Nicholas Stern, who addressed the Institute in 2008. And in the work we have published on everything from the link between security and climate change to the collapse of the region's fishery stocks and the crisis facing the river systems of Southeast Asia. We take abiding interest in technology developments. Arguably, no factor has contributed as much to the evolution of how the world works over the past 100 years as technology. Think of the influence of nuclear power and nuclear weapons. Think about the telecommunications revolution. Think of the space age and how we rely so much now on satellites. The fact that we are now untroubled by diseases that a century ago could inflict millions of people with little prospect of relief or recovery, or that the world's population has quadrupled over the past 100 years, but food production has increased at even a faster rate. And if that's the story of how technology has changed the world over the past century, just think of how it will shape the world in the next 100 years. I'm aware through my involvement with the Victor Chang Cardiac Research Institute that there are imminent breakthroughs in genomic biotechnology and nanotechnology, in targeted diagnostics, drug delivery and tissue engineering. Any combination of these will have a massive influence on human longevity and capacities and profound implications for how we order our societies. They will also potentially transform the way countries relate to each other and their ecological impact on the planet. These issues are incredibly important for Australia. There are few countries in the world whose international situation has been as transformed by the past century of technological change. Think about how the revolution of telecommunications has shaped our relationship with the rest of the world and how it